So we usually start by reciting some prayers to help our mind get into a positive frame, positive state of mind for what we're going to be doing today. And then we'll do a little bit of meditation and generating a positive motivation. So actually, I need to look at this.
Is being recorded.
No. Okay, so let's do these prayers together. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. And then the mandala offering, we imagine the entire universe, all the beautiful, precious things that exist, and transform it into a pure land, and then offer that to the Buddhas. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. And then we'll recite the mantra of the Buddha a few times to make a connection between our mind, our heart, and that of the Buddha, so that we can be more open to receiving the blessings and all the good energy of the Buddha. Taya ta om mune mune maha munaye soha. Taya ta om mune mune maha munaye soha. Taya ta om mune mune maha munaye soha. So let's do a little bit of meditation to settle down our minds in the present, here and now, and then bring into our minds a really positive intention or motivation for being here, joining this weekend retreat. So make sure you're sitting comfortably. Try to keep your back straight if that's possible. Let your shoulders relax and let all the parts of your body relax. If there's any tension anywhere in your body, you can imagine it melting, dissolving, and flowing out of you, leaving your body as light and relaxed as possible. And let your breathing be natural. Allow it to flow in and out in a natural rhythm without controlling it, forcing it, but just letting your body breathe as it normally does. And just be aware of the breath flowing in and out. That's a really good way of settling the mind in the present, because our breath is happening in the present. So when we're paying attention to our breathing, naturally our mind is in the present. And if there are any thoughts in your mind of the past, anything from the past, which can include this morning, or any thoughts about the future, which can include later today, tomorrow, next week, put all those thoughts aside. Just let your mind be right here, right now, present moment, present place. Just being aware of the breath flowing in and flowing out. So it's important to have a positive motivation for the things that we do, especially when it comes to spiritual activities, meditation, listening to spiritual teachings. Our motivation is a major factor that determines what kind of results or consequences will come from the things that we do. And naturally, we want the best results: happiness, well-being, peace in our family, community, in the world, and so on. So in order to ensure the best possible results from the things that we do, we need to have a positive motivation. The best one we can have is altruism, which means wanting to benefit others and the world as much as we can, wanting to bring peace and happiness and relieve suffering, problems, confusion. Just spend a few minutes bringing into your mind whatever thoughts can help you feel that way, and have that as your reason, your motivation for being here. For example, you might think, I want to learn things that will help me to be a better person, more helpful to others, less likely to cause problems to others, and to bring more positive energy, peace into the world. So that's just a suggestion, but feel free to use your own thoughts, whatever feels right to you, to have a positive, altruistic motivation for being here. Okay, so we'll do some more meditation later related to the topic of this weekend course. I feel like there's something crawling on my head. Are there spiders in here? Anyway. Okay. So there's some slides. I can put those up on the screen. So in case some of you aren't, oh, there it is, a little black bug. Would someone like to take him outside to a safe place somewhere? So some of you may not be aware of recent news related to this center, but the spiritual director of the FPMT, of which this center, Thupten Norbuling, is a member, he just passed away 2 days ago, I think. And so the way it's expressed is he entered his final meditation. So what that means is that Tibetan Lamas, during their life, they engage in various practices to be able to recognize the clear light. This is the most subtle level of mind that we all have, but during our life, it's normally not manifest. We don't have the chance to experience it. But when we die, I might talk about this during the weekend course because it's quite interesting. Tibetan Buddhism explains the process of dying, where we go through 8 stages as our body and mind gradually dissolve. And at the last stage, it's called the clear light stage. At that stage, the mind is in its most subtle and pure form, which is called clear light. And so what lamas do, or practitioners of Tantra, highest yoga Tantra, during their life, they train in certain practices to be able to recognize this clear light mind so that when they're actually dying, they will be able to recognize it and then use that mind to meditate on emptiness. And by doing this practice, you speed up the process of attaining enlightenment. That's the whole purpose of it, is to reach enlightenment more quickly to be able to benefit sentient beings. And so, 2 days ago, Rinpoche entered this final meditation on the clear light mind. So these pictures, the one on the left, I thought was really cute because I'm staying in Geshe Sherob's apartment, and there's a picture of him in there. I don't know if you've seen it, but He's holding a koala. It's a very sweet picture. And I saw this picture of Lama Zopa Rinpoche holding a koala. I think this was about 40 years ago, 1983. And then the picture on the right was taken 2 days ago in his room in Kopan Monastery in Nepal, where he's in meditation with no breath. Breath has stopped. And this morning there was an update, some of you may not have seen it, saying that Rinpoche ended his meditation last night, and I figured it was about 7:45 this morning in here, but 10 o'clock last night in Nepal, because there was some blood coming out of one nostril. And this is one of the signs that the consciousness has left the body and is no longer present in the body. And so now they are preparing the body for embalming. They decided to embalm the body. And the update also mentioned the reason for that. A few people were kind of curious why they decided to do that rather than cremate the body. And it was actually suggested by Ling Rinpoche, who's a very important Lama in our tradition. And the reason is because Lama Zopa Rinpoche has so many students and is so widely known. So having the body embalmed, then people can come and pay respects to the holy body. So it will become like an object of pilgrimage. I suppose they will keep it somewhere at Kopan Monastery. And this isn't totally unusual, because actually Ling Rinpoche himself, the previous Ling Rinpoche, who was the Dalai Lama's senior teacher, and he passed away in around 1984, I think. And his body was embalmed and put into a glass case. I had the chance to see it. It was really extraordinary. And it really looked like a real person sitting there. And another Lama, Trulshik Rinpoche, who's a Nyingma Lama and one of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's teachers. So his body was also embalmed. So it seems like it's something done for really important Lamas so that people can go and pay respects and be inspired by that Lama and what he did. And so His Holiness Dalai Lama was asked about this idea of embalming, and he said, yes, it's a very good way forward. So that's the reasons, in case any of you are wondering why. And there's prayers and pujas being done round the clock at Kopan Monastery. All the monks and nuns are taking turns doing those prayers, and many other monasteries as well are doing prayers, and also some Western centers like Nalanda Monastery in France. They're doing lots of prayers, and here as well, some prayers and pujas are being offered. And also several prayers have been composed for Rinpoche's quick return, for him to return, take rebirth, and be recognized and trained so that he can continue his beneficial work in the next life. And so a number of prayers have been composed. The Dalai Lama wrote one prayer. It's still in Tibetan. They're rapidly trying to get it translated into English. Another prayer was written by Chado Rinpoche. He's another important Lama. And Khadro-la. Khadro-la is this woman, Tibetan woman with special abilities, special powers. She's there at Kopan right now, helping with everything. And she also wrote a prayer, and that has been translated into English. And I thought at the end of the day, today we could read it as part of our dedication of merit. So the advice for us as students is to please continue trying to fulfill Rinpoche's holy wishes, especially to practice impermanence and bodhicitta in the context of the Lamrim. Fulfilling the Guru's holy wishes is a very important part of inviting the Guru to return. So I think it's quite auspicious that we're gathered here today to look at this topic of impermanence and death. This is definitely something Rinpoche would be happy about, would approve of. So we have this opportunity to fulfill Rinpoche's wishes. So many of you, have any of you met Lama Zopa Rinpoche? Yeah, probably most of you haven't. I'm not sure if he's even come here. He did? What year was that?
He's been here a few times.
A few times,
Yeah.
okay.
It was the first time was when the FBMT office moved to Taos.
That's right. That's right. That was their headquarters for a while. That was a long time ago.
And then there was two or three other times.
Okay, so some of you may. Okay, so he has been here.
I think Ajna's being a little humble here, and that the center was created by Ajna as a youth, making a promise to Rinpoche.
Okay, I wondered about the history. So you're involved in the beginnings of this. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I feel extremely fortunate because I met Lama Zopa Rinpoche in 1973 in India, Dharamsala. So I've known him for 50 years, not 70. I wish it was 70. So 50 years, I've had this good fortune to be a disciple of Lama Zopa Rinpoche and have teachings from him, and being part of this group of students and centers all over the world. And I could share stories if you want later, but yeah, I do have a lot of material I'd like to share today. So the next slide is a quotation from Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. It was actually on, yesterday there was an email from Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archives, which is collecting and editing and publishing the teachings of both Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So they sent an email, and there was this quotation from Rinpoche. Didn't quite come out the way I wanted, but anyway, it says, impermanence and death don't wait for us. Every moment we are so close to death. Every moment of this life is to prepare for death. Every moment of this life is to free ourselves from suffering. Every moment of this life is to achieve peerless happiness. Every moment of this life is to make the greatest purification. Every moment of this life is to accumulate extensive merit with the thought of impermanence and bodhicitta, and with the practice of Guru Yoga, seeing our own mind as one with the mind of the Guru and the deity, which is the wisdom of non-dual bliss and voidness. This is crazy Zopa's advice for students and friends forever until enlightenment is achieved. So basically he's saying it's important for us to remember, to be aware of impermanence and death, the fact that this life isn't going to last forever. It will come to an end, and we don't know when that is. And so it's important to be aware of that and be prepared for it. And this is not to be afraid or to be sad or to be morbid, those kind of reactions that many people have with regard to death. Some people don't even want to hear about it. Don't talk to me about death. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to think about it. Unfortunately, many people have that attitude. But in Buddhism, no. We need to be aware that it's going to happen. And if we do it in the right way, which I will explain as we go along, then it actually gives a lot of energy, joyful energy, to use our life, however much time we have, even if it's one day, to use our life well, wisely, do things that are beneficial for ourselves, do things that are beneficial for others, do things that are beneficial in a more long-term sense, future lives, enlightenment, and so on. And so we end up feeling very joyful about our life and the way we use our life. So that's basically what he's saying, and that's very, very much the message of Buddhism, which I will unravel as we go along in the course. So the plan is, so the next slide has a kind of outline of what I'm going to be covering during this weekend. So the title of the course is Peaceful Living, Peaceful Dying, because basically the way we live our life will affect the way we die. So if we can live well, in a peaceful way, in a loving way, in a compassionate way, in an ethical way, and so on, we will be able to die peacefully with a positive state of mind. That's the ideal. So what I'm going to be talking about is first sharing some Buddhist perspectives on death, dying, and impermanence, and then how to meditate on death. And we'll do some meditation. I'm not just going to talk about it, but we'll meditate together. And then how to prepare for death. I can't see the full screen on here because there's people across the top, so I don't know how to change that. Oh, okay, I got it now. I got it now. I can do it now. Okay. And then how to prepare for death. So what are some things we can do to prepare ourselves for death? And then if we have time, I have a lot to share, but if we have time, I'll also talk about how to help other people who are dying. Because even before we ourselves face death, people we know, family members, friends, and so on, will probably die. And if it's people we love and care about, we naturally want to help them at that difficult moment. And so there are some things we can do to be helpful to others. So I'll share those as well. So there's a lot of different ideas about death and, different religions, philosophical traditions, psychology and so on, different ideas about death and how to deal with death. And I'm not going to go into all of those, partly because I don't know all of them. I've spent most of my life studying Buddhism, so that's what I'm familiar with. But I do think there's a lot in Buddhism that you don't find in other traditions. For example, one nun that I know was invited to participate in a seminar. This was in UK. A seminar on death and dying, and they had her representing Buddhism, and I think they had a Christian minister, and maybe a Jewish rabbi, and I don't know, maybe a Muslim imam. And so each of these religious leaders was meant to talk about death and dying and preparing for it. And this nun said, the others didn't have much to say. Like there just wasn't much. So it really made her appreciate the richness of particularly Tibetan Buddhist tradition, just the amount of material about death and dying and preparing for it and so on. And I think a lot of people from other traditions are, taking an interest in Buddhism from that point of view. Okay, so as I said, I'll first start with looking at some of the ideas about death from the Buddhist point of view. And if you're not familiar with the Buddha's teachings, the Buddha emphasized that we shouldn't just blindly believe anything he says or any religious teacher said. He very much encouraged people to think for themselves, to investigate things for themselves. So he said that about his own teachings. He said, don't just believe what I say. You check it out. You investigate. You decide for yourself if this is true or not before accepting it. So keep an open mind. There may also be things that the Buddha said that you may feel uncomfortable about, and I don't know if I believe that or accept that. But try to keep an open mind and investigate it, and not just blindly reject. So neither blindly believe nor blindly reject things without investigating them, thinking about them. And that can involve your own thoughts. It can also involve discussing with others, asking questions. It's very much encouraged in Buddhism to ask questions. There's something you're not clear about, something you don't understand. And I'll hopefully leave time for that. I won't talk too much. I'll leave you the chance to ask questions. Okay, so the first point in Buddhism is that death is a natural, inevitable part of life. It's not a punishment or a sign of failure. And I have heard that some people do have this idea. For example, maybe in the New Age movement, there, sometimes this idea that, especially if you're maybe not very old, you're maybe in your 30s or 40s or 50s, and you have some terminal illness, that you've done something wrong, like it's some kind of failure, or a punishment. People who believe in some divine creator, God or whatever, may feel, oh, I'm a really bad person and God is punishing me for having this illness, or coming to the end of my life so young. Have you heard of that people have that idea? That's definitely not the case in Buddhism. So Buddhism says that death is normal, death is natural. It's something that happens to everyone. It's part of nature, just as the sun rises and sets, although it doesn't really, it's the earth that's turning around the sun. But anyway, it looks like it comes up and goes down. And then, like now it's springtime, so there's all these leaves and flowers and things growing. Babies are born, human babies, animal babies, and so on. And then we go through a process of living and then eventually come to the end of life. That's just how things are. It's natural, it's normal. So it's definitely not a sign that we've done something wrong and that we're being punished or that we're a failure. Because you can see even good people who spend their entire lives living very ethical lives and dedicating themselves to others, helping others, like Mother Teresa, Mahatma Gandhi, the Buddha, Jesus, these great spiritual beings and saints, they died. So how can that be a punishment? So I'd like to just share a couple of quotations from the Buddha about how death, impermanence and death are natural parts of life. So the next slide has a quote from Buddha. So it says, what is born will die. What has been gathered will be dispersed. So, for example, a gathering, like we're a group of people who have gathered here for a few hours and then we're going to go home at the end of the day. People gather for a concert or a festival or a different meeting. They spend some time together and then everyone leaves. And so that's just something that happens. What has been accumulated will be exhausted. So, you go shopping, for example, you buy a big supply of food and other supplies, and eventually it runs out. You have to go back to Costco or wherever you go shopping and collect more. So accumulating things eventually runs out. What has been built up will collapse. So we build houses, we build office buildings, we build bridges, and they may last a long time, even hundreds of years or even thousands of years, but eventually they will fall apart, either naturally or sometimes destroyed by fire or earthquakes or whatever. So they're not going to last forever. And what has been high will be brought low. So a good illustration of that is people's careers. And there's many examples of people who spend a lot of time and energy developing their career and accumulating wealth and power and so on. And sooner or later, they're going to lose that. Sometimes it happens because of a scandal. They're accused of some misbehavior or not paying their taxes or whatever. Or they become too old to continue what they're doing. They have to retire. Or somebody else comes along who's better at what they do. And so then they slip down from position number 1 to 2 to 10 to 50 and so on and so forth. So nobody can stay in the high spot, the number 1 spot forever. They always eventually move down the line. And then the next slide has another quotation, which I really like. It reminds me of a line from Shakespeare. It says, "This existence of ours is as transient as autumn clouds. To watch the birth and death of beings is like looking at the movements of a dance. A lifetime is like a flash of lightning in the sky, rushing by like a torrent down a steep mountain." So it isn't just death at the end of our life that is a change, but there's actually constant change going on all the time, every day, every minute, every second. So in Buddhism, at least in Tibetan Buddhism, they say there's 2 kinds of impermanence, 2 levels of impermanence. One is coarse or gross impermanence, which is something we can see. It's visible to us. And so that's like when somebody dies, or when a building collapses, or a car crashes, or leaves fall from the tree in the autumn. So it's obvious, visible signs of change and impermanence and the going out of existence of something. That's coarse or gross impermanence. And then there's subtle impermanence, which is not visible, but it's happening all the time, every moment, every nanosecond. So things like our bodies and buildings and trees and plants, the planet itself and all the other heavenly bodies, stars, sun, moon, and so on. So all these physical things are going through constant change every single fraction of a moment. They don't stay the same from one moment to the next. That's not visible. We can't see that happening. Although they do say that if you develop your mind in meditation, you develop really good, strong concentration and do certain practices, it is possible. I haven't achieved this, but they say it is possible to actually see the particles, the atoms of something. You could look at a wall, I guess, and not see a solid wall, but see particles dancing, moving. That would be quite extraordinary. So it is possible for some special beings to have that experience. But for most of us, we look at a wall and it looks totally solid and unchanging. But we can know intellectually that that's not the case, because it's made of molecules and atoms and finer particles of matter. And you get down to that level and there's just constant change taking place. And in fact, a lot of space in between these particles. So it's not really solid at all. So that's the meaning of subtle impermanence. Subtle impermanence means this constant, continuous change that's taking place in physical objects, like a wall or like our bodies. And it's because of that, because of this constant change that's happening, that we have these more coarse, obvious changes. So death isn't something that just happens in one moment. It's happening all our life. We are getting older every minute. In fact, they say right after you're born, the second moment of birth, after birth, you are already aging. Our bodies are already aging and moving towards the final moment of death. So it's a process that's happening continuously during our life. And so that quotation is quite quite, I think, powerful. That our very existence is like autumn clouds, or even spring clouds, or any clouds. They pass through the sky very quickly. And then this birth and death of beings is like looking at the movements of a dance. So that's what reminds me of that line from Shakespeare. It was in his play, As You Like It. He said, all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances. So that's quite, I don't know, beautiful. We are just like actors in a film, in a movie. We have our entrance and we have our exit, and our lines in between, our movements and our actions and our lines in between. A lifetime is like a flash of lightning in the sky. I mean, comparatively, if you think about the age of our planet, I'm not good at that, but it's how many billions of years that our planet has been existing?
4.5.
Huh?
4.5.
4.5 billion?
Yeah.
Okay, 4.5 billion years since this planet arose and came into existence. 4.5 billion years. And then I remember seeing drawings of this, like how much time it was before human beings started appearing in this world. It's a huge chunk of time. So the amount of time human beings have been living in this world is very, very small compared to the age of the planet. And that's still like hundreds of thousands of years. What is it since human beings? Although I guess that's always, they're always finding new information. But anyway, it's relatively small since human beings started walking around and doing things. But it's still a few 100,000 years. And then one lifespan, which might be 70, 80, 90 years, it's just like a tiny sliver of that amount of time, right? So from that point of view, it is like a flash of lightning. Yeah, it's very, very brief in relation to the whole history of our planet. So let's just stop at this point and do a little bit of reflection, meditation on this idea of impermanence. Using the Buddha's words. So make yourselves comfortable. And again, settle your mind in the present. Don't let the mind wander off to the past or the future or some other place. So keep it right here, focused on this meditation. And be aware of your body. It may seem, when we don't think about it, it may seem as if our body isn't changing much, especially when we're sitting still like we are right now, trying to sit still in our chair, in our seat. But contemplate that this body is made of many, many parts. It's not one whole monolithic thing. It's a composite of many parts, such as skin, blood, bones, organs, tissues, nerves, and so on. And those parts, in turn, are made of smaller parts, such as cells. And the cells of our body are constantly going through changes. Some are coming into existence, others are going out of existence, others are moving around the body, doing their function, whatever their job may be. Some are reproducing, splitting. So even as we're sitting here still, there's this movement, this activity happening in a very subtle level of our body. So just try to get a sense of that. We can't perceive that with our naked eye unless we look through a microscope, but we can understand it intellectually. And then even the cells are made of parts, going down to the smallest parts like molecules, atoms, subatomic particles, quarks. I don't know the names of all of those, but scientists have been able to divide even atoms into smaller parts. And on that level as well, there's constant change and movement. Those tiny particles don't remain still, frozen, static. They too are moving and changing. So since the tiniest particles making up our body are changing, not frozen and static, that means our body is changing. Even as we sit still, even as we sleep at night, constantly, every minute, every second of our day, our body is going through changes. And the same is true for all other physical, material phenomena. This building we're in and the materials making it up. All the other buildings and human-made things, roads, cars, and all the things in nature, trees, mountains, the earth itself, its oceans and rivers and lakes. So all of these things are actually going through changes every minute, every second. They don't stay the same. And back to our bodies, as our body is changing, it doesn't get younger, it gets older. So it's simply inevitable. It's in the nature of things that at some point this body will no longer be able to remain alive. And we will experience death. And just see how your mind reacts to that thought. if you recoil from it, if you feel frightened about it, well, that may be how you feel at this moment, but you can work on that and learn to be more accepting, even more comfortable with the idea of dying. It doesn't have to be frightening, disturbing, upsetting. Okay, so you can open your eyes, come out of the meditation. So that's one perspective from the Buddhist point of view about death, dying, that it's normal, it's natural. So the next thing I'd like to share is that it's important to accept and be aware of death. So the Buddha very much emphasized in his teachings, he taught his followers that they should contemplate impermanence and death and maintain awareness of that. And the reasons for accepting and being aware of death, one reason is to be prepared for it. I guess some people think, oh, I don't need to think about death. It'll be fine. You just die and that's it. But that's not necessarily very realistic. Many people come to the end of their life and feel very unprepared and very frightened and overwhelmed with emotions. And some of those emotions can be difficult, despair, fear, even anger. I've heard of people dying with anger. They're angry at their doctors for not saving their life, angry at family members for not doing enough to help them, and so on. And it would be very unfortunate to pass away in an angry state of mind, or in a fearful state of mind, or in a feeling of despair, hopelessness, depression, regret, guilt, right? So that wouldn't be a nice way to die. According to Buddhism, and I'm sure this is just how most people feel, if we imagine an ideal death, how we would like to be when we die, I think we'd like to be in a good state of mind, feeling calm and peaceful and even happy, cheerful, not in a negative state of mind. And it is possible. It's definitely possible to die in a positive state of mind. I've heard stories of this, and I've also with my mother when she passed away. She was amazingly positive and cheerful. So it's definitely possible. But if we don't do anything during our life to prepare for death, then chances are we won't be able to die in such a peaceful state of mind. We might be overwhelmed by fear and other disturbing emotions. So if we have this awareness that we're going to die at some point, then that will be an incentive for us to prepare for it. Just recently, I've had some correspondence with somebody whose wife died just last year, I think. And he said that they knew that she was going to die. He didn't say why, but maybe she had cancer and it was just a matter of time. So he said they actually had 2 years in which they could have prepared for her death, but they didn't. They didn't talk about it. They didn't do anything to prepare for it. And I guess she was very frightened. She died in a lot of fear, and it was quite upsetting for him as well. And so he says I don't want that to happen to me. I want to be prepared for death. I want to be able to die in a positive state of mind. Because he could also see how if the person who's dying is in a negative state of mind or disturbed state of mind, that has an adverse effect on the people around them. That they will feel worried and upset and anxious. And so he doesn't want that to happen. He doesn't want to cause other people to be worried and upset. So he wants to be in a good state of mind and sees that will be helpful not only for himself, but also for the people around him. So that's just one example of, an illustration of how important it is to prepare for death. And to prepare for death, there are practical things we can do, like making a will. It's a good idea to take care of that. And you don't have to be elderly to make a will, because you just never know when it's going to happen. But that way we don't have to worry. We won't be hung up with, what's going to happen to my money? What's going to happen to my house, my car, and so on. So if we've cleared all of that in a will, then that's not going to be a concern. And things like an advance directive. But from a spiritual point of view, particularly from the Buddhist point of view, preparing for death means preparing ourselves mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And the best way to do that is to live a good life. Try to be kind, compassionate, ethical, generous, all these positive qualities, these positive attributes. So cultivate those, practice those as much as you can during life. And if you do that, because they say, and I think it's true, that the way you die is the way you live. The way you live is the way you die. So the state of mind you're going to be in at the time of death will just be a natural extension or continuation of the state of mind you have during your life. So during your life, if you get angry a lot, if you get angry 100 times a day and are, shouting and throwing your anger around at people, then there's a good chance you'll get angry at the time of death as well, because that's just your normal state of mind. On the other hand, if you're really kind and compassionate, considerate of others, helpful for others, and so on and so forth, and knowing how to deal with your negative emotions, then that's the way you'll be at the time of death. And I saw that with my mother. She was just a really loving and caring person her whole life. She was also very devoted. She was a Catholic. And I think she had this very deep connection with God. She wasn't outwardly religious, always saying prayers, but she just felt very deeply. Because somebody asked her just shortly before she passed away, something like, "Aren't you afraid?" And she said, "No." Because she said, "God has taken good care of me all my life, and I know he's going to take care of me now." And I was just like, wow. I didn't know she had that in her. But that gave her strength, that gave her the ability to remain calm, peaceful, cheerful. I didn't see any sign of fear or anxiety or clinging. She wasn't clinging to her house, to her family, to anything. She was ready to go. So I think that was an extension of the way she had lived her life. So so for me, that was very powerful. It's like evidence that living a good life will enable you to have a good death. Yeah, so that's the second point. We will be more likely to live well and die well. So if we are aware that we're not going to be here forever, this life is going to end, then contemplating that will lead us to think, I want to live a good life. I want to be a good person. Okay, then a few more perspectives on death from the Buddhist point of view. Number 3 is that death isn't necessarily a bad experience. It depends on how we prepare ourselves. So I think probably a lot of people are afraid that death will be painful, physically painful, mentally, emotionally painful. That's probably why a lot of people don't want to think about it, don't want to hear about it. They think it's going to be awful, a terrible experience. But it doesn't have to be. It all depends on how we prepare ourselves. So there are examples like my mother, but I've also heard of other examples of people who were able to die very well. Oh, another man I've been corresponding with worked in palliative care for many years. One of the first patients that he met was a woman who was in the hospital and was ill, and he observed that as she got worse, she wasn't getting better, she was getting worse, more sick, but she was able to handle it mentally, emotionally. She didn't get upset, and she made all the necessary preparations, saying goodbye to her family members. And so she handled death really well. And that was such a powerful experience for him. He said, not everyone is like that, unfortunately. Many people die with fear and totally unprepared and not in a good state of mind at all. So anyway, it is definitely possible that death can be not a bad experience, but even a positive experience. And but in order to have such a death, we do need to prepare ourselves for it. And some people might think, well, why do we have to think about death and talk about death? Doesn't that make you morbid? Yeah, we have that expression, being morbid, as if that's something negative. Well, I guess it could be. It depends on how you think about death. If you're worried about it, if you're afraid of it, if you're depressed about it, then that's not helpful. But that's not the way of thinking about death in Buddhism. The way of thinking about death is we'll go into it. There's a whole meditation on death. It's, as that quote from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, is to empower us, to energize us to live life in a positive way, with kindness, caring for others, and so on. And if we live our life in that way, we're going to be a happy person, because those are qualities, those are states of mind and ways of behaving that bring happiness to ourselves. We feel good about ourselves, and it makes others around us feel good as well. It's a way of bringing happiness and peace and benefit to others. And so, there's pictures of Lama Zopa Rinpoche in the last, couple of months, in the last year, and so on. And he's always looking joyful and laughing, like, he's just so full of joy, and it's what's the word? It affects others. It's contagious. That's the word. It's this contagious joy. So, coming to the end of his life, he wasn't depressed or unhappy or miserable. He was very, very joyful. Okay, so the next point, number 4, is another perspective on Buddhism, on death from the Buddhist point of view, is death is not a final end, but a gateway into another life. So this idea, I know, is challenging for many people. The idea of rebirth or reincarnation. Many Western people have difficulty. And if you're one of those people, it's good to look at why. Like, try to explore why it is you have difficulty, you have resistance to this idea of rebirth or reincarnation. For some people, it may be because it's not something you were taught as you grew up. Your parents didn't believe in it. You didn't hear it at school. I mean, for myself, because I grew up in a Catholic family, we did have the idea of something beyond this life. That, this life ends, but then you have a soul that will continue on. So many people, Christians, Jews, Muslims, they have that idea of a continuation of some part of us after we die. So it's similar to rebirth, not exactly, but at least it's not quite as drastic as the view that we just die and that's it. There's nothing that continues, which is what many people believe. And this, I haven't studied science. I'm not fully knowledgeable about science, but the more they're studying the brain, the more many people feel convinced that mind, consciousness, all our thoughts and our feelings are simply produced by this organ inside of our head. And once that stops, once that's not functioning anymore, there's nothing left. There's no more you. There's no more thoughts, no more feelings, no more. Everything just stops. So many people have that view. And it seems to be supported by science. But my understanding is it's still a theory. I don't know if everyone realizes this. It's a theory, but it's not really proven by science. And there's lots of evidence. There's lots of, well, I don't know if evidence is the right word, but a lot of cases of, for example, near-death experiences. Many people have that, where their heart, their brain, everything stops for a period of time, either because of a cardiac arrest or an accident. Everything kind of stops for a while, and then they were revived. They come back to life. And during that time when everything was stopped, including their brain, they have experiences. And some of those experiences can even be verified. For example, a person may find themselves up on the ceiling or in a corner of the room, watching the doctors trying to resuscitate their body, and they can report what the doctors did, what was said, and it was true. The doctors and nurses will say, yes, it's true. What this person saw was true. So how do you explain that if you believe that mind and consciousness are just a product of the brain, and yet here's experiences people are having when their brain has shut down? It's not operating. So they don't have an explanation of that. And then there's lots of cases of children remembering previous lives. It's not always possible to verify those because they might have been just some ordinary person that there was no history of, no records of. But there are cases of where it can be verified. I don't know if you've heard of this little boy. It's just in the last 10 years or so. He was born in Louisiana, James Leininger. And when he was 2 or 3 years old, he started having nightmares. Several times a week, he'd wake up screaming and saying, the plane is on fire. The little man can't get out. And this was happening again and again. And his parents were, quite concerned. And eventually they contacted someone, Carol Bowman, who's done a lot of work, a lot of research with children and children's memories of past lives. And so she recommended that they ask him for more information, like who's this little man and why is the plane on fire and things like that. So then he started talking about it. And it turns out, to make a long story short, he was having memories of a previous life where he was a pilot in World War II, and his plane was shot down over Japan. I think it was Iwo Jima, one of the last battles in the Second World War. And he could remember his name, the name of the battleship, friends that he had, fellow pilots, the kind of plane he flew, and certain quirks about that plane. So this little kid, 3, 4 years old, had all this information that his father did research and said, it's true. How do you know this stuff? And his parents were Christian. They didn't believe in reincarnation. But finally they did, because what was coming out of their little child. So there are cases like that where information given by the child can be verified, and then it's very difficult to explain. How did this little kid get that information? I mean, skeptics will say, oh, his parents were feeding him this information and setting it all up. But, I mean, who would do that? Anyway, So it's good to look into that kind of information because it just, yeah, it will make you question this view of scientific materialists and a popular view that everything just stops when the body does. When the body dies, there's no continuation. So again, try to keep an open mind. The Buddha said, don't just blindly believe what I say. Check it out for yourself. But don't just blindly reject it either. To keep an open mind. But yeah, according to Buddhism, when we die, it isn't just like a candle flame going out and that's it. But there's continuation. What continues, according to Buddhism, is our mind, our consciousness. And that will take another life, another rebirth. And the kind of life that we have in our, next time will depend on how we live this life. And that's another important reason why it's so important to live a good life, because it will affect not only our state of mind at the time of death, but it will also affect our next life, where we're born, what kind of experiences we have. Naturally, we want a good one. We don't want to be born in some awful situation. But that depends on our karma. What kind of karma we create, what kind of behavior we do in our life. So for people who do believe in reincarnation or believe in heaven and hell, that becomes a strong incentive to live a good life. Avoid doing harmful, negative actions, do positive, beneficial actions as much as we can. And but I also heard this story. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but at the time of the Buddha, because it was a controversial topic then as well. In Buddha's time, there were many different religious teachers, philosophers, and they all had their different doctrines and different practices they were teaching. So not everybody believed in rebirth and reincarnation. It was a hot topic. And so apparently one man met the Buddha and he was kind of very anxious. And he said, tell me, is there another life after this one or not? And the Buddha in turn asked him, well, if there was another life after this one, how would you live this life? And the man said, oh, I would be a good person. I would help others. I would, not do negative things and so on. And then the Buddha said, and what if there wasn't another life after this one? What if this was just the only life? How would you live it? And the man thought about it and he said, well, I would be a good person and I would help others and not do it. So that's really the point. The point is, whether there's another life after this one or not, it still makes sense to live a good life, to be a good person, because we'll be happier. We'll feel better about ourselves. We'll have better relations with other people and so on. So if you really think about, how do I want to live? What's the best way to live? You'll probably come to that conclusion. And that's the important thing is, not be all hung up on what happens after death, but what we are doing now. And if you can recognize, this is something the Dalai Lama emphasizes again and again and again, the importance of kindness. And, he says, my religion is kindness. This is something universal. Everybody appreciates kindness. And if you think about that, you like people treating you with kindness. How do other people want to be treated? They also want to be treated with kindness. And if you can be kind to others, you'll feel good about yourself. They'll feel good too. So it makes everybody happy. So it's just like the recipe for happiness and feeling satisfied about the way you live your life. So that's the important thing. And then the last point I'll share is that we can become free of death and rebirth. So this is a Buddhist view that in Buddhism, this is expression samsara, or cyclic existence is a translation of that, is the situation we and other ordinary beings are in, where we are subject to having to die and then take rebirth over and over again, like a Ferris wheel. It just keeps going around and around and around. We've already been in this situation a long time. We've already had many lives before this one, and we will have more lives after this. But this isn't something eternal. It's not going to just go on forever and ever and ever. There is an end to it. But we have to make it end. We have to bring it to an end. It's not going to just end naturally. And that's really the message of the Buddha. That's what he himself did. He found a way to end this whole cycle of death and rebirth and suffering and problems. He attained what's called nirvana, or liberation, a state of peace, freedom from suffering. So he found that state and then spent the remaining years of his life teaching others so that they could find it as well. And during his lifetime, many of his followers were able to do that. Meeting him, listening to his teachings, many of them were also able to attain nirvana. And since that time, these teachings have been passed on, and it's maybe harder nowadays than at the time of the Buddha, but it's definitely possible. And we can at least start taking steps on the path in that direction to nirvana and enlightenment. Yeah. So any questions so far on anything that I've said?
I just want to point out in popular culture, there's a lovely movie, Harold and Maude.
Sorry?
A lovely movie called Harold and Maude, which is a little dated now, but it has two people at different ends of the spectrum approaching death and the concept of death in different ways. And it's very amusing the way that it's done.
Harold and Maude. Yeah. Yeah, there's a few films that are, I was thinking the one, the bucket, what's the one about the bucket list? Is that the name of the movie, The Bucket List? Yeah, so that's also about people approaching death and what insights they gain, as they're trying to do all these things they wanted to do, never had a chance to. And they both come to the realization the important thing is loving and caring and having good relations with others. So they manage to accomplish that before they pass away, which is quite lovely.
Getting older in our 70s and stuff, we really kind of think of that, and we come through other traditions, and it's always been a concern what's going to happen, I know there's just a gate where you just got to go through a veil, but I had a very dear friend of mine for 25 years, and her doctor told her she had about 2 weeks to live because of kidney issues. So she spent that whole week saying goodbye to all her friends. She was British, around the world, and giving away all her possessions. And then she was at her daughter's house, and she said, I'm just going to go take a nap. And she went into the other bedroom and just made the transition. And it was so beautiful, and that's the way she lived her life, because she was such a beautiful being and knew how to be a friend. And I guess when you said that, I hadn't thought about that. I thought, oh, that's how to do it. It was just inspiration.
And it's never too late. I mean, even if, you spend 50 years or 60 years of being mean and nasty and selfish and so on, you can always change. It is possible to change. Some people can change remarkably, even from one day to the next. Well, it does take a while, but it is possible to change. You don't have to think, oh, I'm such a mean and nasty person, I could never become nice and kind and generous. But we can. It is possible. So, but the earlier you start, the better. So starting in your younger years and then having a long stretch of time to cultivate these positive qualities, then there's a greater chance. Yeah.
Venerable, we have a question on Zoom.
Okay. Is it coming through this computer?
Terry, go ahead and unmute.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I know you, thank you so much for this teaching. This has been marvelous this morning and very timely. You haven't spoken yet. I know we're not talking yet about helping others, but I have a question about that. If you could just talk a little bit. And I'm going to talk first about my experience with my dog, who was getting older. And I had conversations with the vet. You know, she said, well, you're Buddhist. What does that mean? I said, my dog's karma is her karma. And I have no intention of putting her to sleep. You know, she needs to experience her karma. And then at the very end of her life, it had happened overnight. She just went into this excruciating pain. And I flinched. You know, I called the vet in and we had her put to sleep. I couldn't, it was just beyond what I could do to sit there and watch that. And then extending that to like my father, who was in pain in the hospital, and the doctors were recommending, you know, like morphine to be used, but that's going to dull our minds. Can you just speak about modern medicine, the role of modern medicine, and how we make that decision? And the caveat with that too is, how do you sit there and watch somebody you love so much suffer like that?
Oh, that's a huge
Thank
question.
you.
Did everyone hear? Yeah. Wow. Well, with animals, yeah, generally in the Buddhist view, we don't really, there isn't that tradition of putting animals to sleep, putting them out of their misery. It's complicated, but I have heard, I know this woman in Holland who is a vet. She's a retired vet, and she's also been a long-term Buddhist. And I think she had some discussion with Lama Zopa Rinpoche about this. And it seems that it's not so hard and fast. There, you know, if your animal, it really is in pain and, you know, there's no way it's going to survive, there are things you can do. And she has told me, you know, anybody who's in that situation can write to her and get advice. But you just have to do it with a lot of wisdom and a lot of care and a lot of love, and try to provide some dharma before the animal passes away. And then with human beings, it's a little more complicated. Although there are places where, what is it called? Euthanasia? Assisted suicide. I don't know if that's the case in this state, but in some states, people do have that option. And I guess people fly to Switzerland as well because you can do it there. It's a little more complicated. But so if you're in the position of a loved one dying and in pain, I mean, I don't have a lot of experience with this, but what I've heard is that with hospice, with palliative care and hospice, they do have the ability to administer like morphine or pain medication in such a way that the person isn't totally out of it. There's still some consciousness present, but they're not, you know, in unbearable pain. So it's kind of a middle way. Have you heard of this? And there's also a method apparently where the patient is able to self-administer. They have like a little, I don't know, something they could push with their thumb. And then, so when they feel the need for a dose of medicine, they can do that. So that's what I've heard. And so it seems like even in hospice and palliative care, there is this concern about the person remaining conscious, remaining lucid, not being just totally out of it. And they have found a way of doing that, a sort of middle way between unbearable pain and being totally unconscious. So I don't know if that is something you've discussed with the doctors, taking care of your father.
Sorry, I muted myself. Yes, that's both of those things are helpful. Thank you.
And yeah, in general, when we are with someone who's dying, there are things we can do on the spiritual level. We can do prayers for them. You don't even have to do it out loud. You can do meditations, like Medicine Buddha is a particularly good practice to do. And that may have an effect. There may be some, unseen connection between your mind and the mind of the person passing away, that you may be able to affect them and help them to be more at ease physically, have less pain, and also mentally and emotionally.
Yeah, thank you. And with my dog, we saw the end coming. And for months, I had been practicing Dharma with her. It was interesting because I'd hold like Medicine Buddha pictures in front of her, and she really liked Medicine Buddha, and she liked His Holiness. She didn't respond to other deities, but those were the two she responded to. And so I had those around her, and I did 1 million Medicine Buddhas with her. So she had Dharma. And the thing is, she was not asking to be put to sleep. It was me, it was just like, it was so hard for me to sit there and watch this terrible pain. She was in the moment. She was just experiencing it. So in a way, she's been really my teacher of what's possible, to just be with what's happening. But sometimes it gets too hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would have a hard time with that too. So I'll talk more about that tomorrow.
Judith has
Thank
a
you.
question.
Sorry?
Judith has
Another-
a question online.
Uh-huh.
Is it okay for her to unmute?
Yes.
Judith, did you want to ask a question?
Well, I'm not sure, but I can kind of comment on some of the things that Terry was saying. I have been, for the last 5 years, caregiving for the dying, and I mean brothers, sisters, beloved pets, and I'm dealing with a cat dying right now. So I think where I'm getting to about all of this is that I see myself thinking, loving, caring, dharma, whatever. And one of the things I've come to know is this two-legged. For a cat or my brother, I just bring too much to the picture. And if I think it's an element of letting go of my mind, of my thinking, of my seeing, and is in your experience, is there something to this? There's so much chatter in me, and there's so much chatter in my learning all about Buddhism and my letting go of my Catholicism, et cetera, et cetera. I think if I can just get to, and maybe it's just getting to unity and be with those I love, and that I do know, there is love here. And then there's all this other stuff that expresses itself through me. So I just wonder what you have to say about that.
Kind of a lot there. Yeah, as I was listening to you, I just started thinking, I have a book that I have a Kindle copy, and I was reading it on my journey here, and it's by Frank Ostaseski. I'm not sure if I got his name right, but he's one of the founders of the Zen Hospice in San Francisco, which is one of the first, I think it started, I don't know how long ago, but it's one of the first hospice organizations, at least in the Buddhist tradition. And so he's had like 30 years of experience being with dying people, and he's been with thousands of people who are dying. And one of the things that I remember he spoke about is the importance of just being with a person. And not having expectations about what is going to happen, how you want it to happen, and so on, but just letting it happen, letting the person go through this process and supporting them. And he said, it sounded, if I remember correctly, it sounded like he said most people do work through what they need to work through and come to a good place. If you just give them the space to do that and not try to manipulate the situation according to how you think it should be. I'm not sure if I fully understand what you're saying, and I'm not sure if I fully understood what he said, but this is just what's coming up in my mind in response to your question. So maybe that I can share that book. Might be helpful for you to read as well, because he's someone with a lot of experience with death and dying. And yeah, I don't know. Does that sound like it might be helpful?
Yes, thank you. And I'm somewhat aware of his work. And I suspect he's talking about letting go and let happen. And I think that's what I'm trying to have it clean up within me. And it's almost frightening for me to say, well, here someone is in my care, they're dying, they've got pain or whatever. I should. But I should. I've watched it. It creates or whatever. So can I, to his point, sit back, give space, and let this natural phenomena happen? And I'm here to tell you, for this little entity meeting me, that is one of the hardest things I've ever danced with. And do I have my dance steps down? No. Have I been given huge numbers of opportunities to learn this dance? Yes. And I just hope I really do that. Meaning, let this dance the best it can be.
Yeah, so I think when we are with people who are dying or beings who are dying, we have an opportunity to see ourselves, see things about ourselves that we may not have seen before, and learn a lot and grow a lot. So, in fact, I think that's one thing Frank said in this book, that all these people who've been dying have been his greatest teachers. He feels grateful to all of them because he's learned a great deal from being with them and going through this process of dying with them. So it sounds like that's maybe where you're at as well. You're needing to look at things in yourself and make some adjustments. Okay, I just want to do a little bit more before we stop for lunch, and then after lunch, we'll do some meditation on this. So the next slide starts looking at meditation on death, and probably many of you are familiar with this, but it doesn't hurt to hear it again and again and again, and do it again and again and again. So there's different ways of meditating on death in Buddhism, and probably in other religions as well, but this one is in the Lamrim, the teachings on the path to enlightenment, and it's called a 9-point meditation on death because it has 9 points. And the 9 points are divided into 3 groups. So each group is related to what's called a root, one of the 3 roots. And so the 3 roots are the certainty of death, and then this uncertainty of the time of death, and then how only spiritual practice will be helpful at that time. So those are the 3 main points. And then each of those has 3 subpoints, or they call them 9 reasons to contemplate, to meditate on. And then there are conclusions after each of these 3 main points. Things ideally you come to realize and make a decision about in your life. And so, I'd like to start talking about the first root, and I'll just explain it and then we'll do it after lunch. So the next slide shows that. The first root is that death is definite or inevitable. And that might seem obvious. You know, if anyone were to ask us, do you think you're going to die? I think we would all say, well, yeah. I mean, that's obvious. Everybody dies. But that's more up here in our head. But when it comes to our heart or our gut, how we actually feel and how we live our life, we probably don't really feel like we're going to die. So it's something we need to bring from up here down to our heart and our gut. And so this meditation is very helpful for that. And so there are 3 reasons or points to contemplate in order to reach that understanding that we are definitely going to die. So the first one is that everybody has to die. So like that quote from the Buddha, which said, whatever is born will die. So it's helpful. For example, just to think about this planet and how many people have already been born on this planet and lived and then died. I don't think anybody can count, because in the past they didn't have censuses to count how many human beings there were. They only started that. There's probably been billions, maybe billions, I don't know, millions of people who've already lived and died on this planet. So it's helpful to think about that, about just to get some idea. Oh, there's been a lot of people who have been born and lived their lives and then they died. And that includes people who've been great people in some way or another, like great leaders. You know, when we study history, we learn about the kings and the queens and the emperors and the presidents and the prime ministers who did great things in their life. And they were great leaders of others, great accomplishers of things. But they weren't able to avoid death. They all died. And then other people were great in other ways, like great artists or inventors, scientists. So the people we learn about in history, the people who did great things. So even though they're incredibly intelligent, incredibly talented, did incredible things in their life, they were not able to avoid dying. So they all died. And that also includes the great spiritual leaders like the Buddha, Jesus, Confucius, Muhammad. So great saints who had incredible experiences and gave teachings and led others and founded religions and so on. So they also had to die. And so in the same way, we will one day die. We can't avoid death. We can't escape death. So that's one way to contemplate, just to think about the people in the past. And then you can also think about people in your own life. Go back over your life and think about people that you have known who've already passed away. We've all known people who've died, people in our family, friends, even classmates. I had a few classmates at school who died. One in the 3rd grade, one of my classmates died. I mean, that's only 9 years old. Another in senior year of high school, what's that, 16, 17, she died. So, and then teachers, neighbors, people you worked with, and so on. So that's really powerful too, to think about people you yourself have known, interacted with, had experiences with, and how they've already passed away. And then bring that home to yourself and say to yourself, just as that happened to them, one day it will happen to me. So just to get a sense that that's something I will go through, because our mind has this tendency, I don't know if you've noticed it, to say, that's not going to happen to me. When you hear about somebody dying, it's like, oh yeah, that happened to them, but it's not going to happen to me. It's not something we do deliberately, I don't think deliberately, consciously, but it's just this avoidance, denial of death. And I also find in myself this idea, well, I've lived so many years, I've woken up so many mornings. I haven't figured out how many mornings I've woken up, but you just have this expectation that's just going to keep going like this. I'm going to keep waking up every morning and going to bed every night. It's happened so many times already, so many years and days and minutes. So it's just going to keep going like that. So it is difficult. I think it really is difficult for us to get that conception that, no, it's not going to keep going forever. One day it's going to be the end. That's going to happen. And then the second point is our lifespan is always increasing. So there we can think about, no, go back to the previous, I'm still on that one. Our lifespan is always decreasing. So time never stands still, in case you haven't noticed. It just keeps going. We can't stop time. Even if you throw away your clocks and your calendars, time still passes because our body's changing. Every minute, every second, our body is getting older. And so as the minutes go by, then the hours go by, then the days go by, then the months and the years, it just keeps going by. And as that is happening, we are getting closer to death. So it's almost like we are on a train or on a plane that's traveling and taking us closer and closer to the end of our life. And we can't get off. We can't get off this vehicle. We can't stop it. So it's like, life is like that. Life is like a journey to death and can't be stopped. We can't get off. So we're just moving continuously closer and closer to death. So I put an hourglass on here because that's a good symbol. When you turn the hourglass, then the sands start running from the top to the bottom, and eventually they'll all run out. So we have a certain amount of time to live, and we don't know how long that is. Everyone's different. Everyone's lifespan is different. There's nobody who can tell us how much time we have. And there's no fixed amount of time that everybody has. So each person has their own. This is determined by our karma, according to Buddhism. The karma that is the cause for us to be born in this life is also determines how much time we have. But we don't know that. It's not like we're born with a tag around us saying, you have this much time to live. So it's completely unknown, but it's definite that at some point we will come to the end of our life. So it's a bit like the sands in the hourglass running out. So every minute, every day, every year, our time is running out. So we don't really like thinking about this, but we do need to, and that's why it is helpful to contemplate this, get a sense of impermanence. And then the third point is we have a limited amount of time for practice. So if we do see the value of spiritual practice, spiritual study, doing meditation, working on our mind, making our mind more positive, learning to be more kind, compassionate, generous, and so on, and decreasing our disturbing emotions. So if we see that that is worthwhile, then it's important to realize we don't have all the time in the world, because otherwise there's the danger of procrastination. You know, like we think, yeah, I really want to do that. That's really important to do. But then we can find so many other things to do that take priority over that. And that gets pushed down on our on our to-do list. And then there's the danger that we may not get around to doing it. Have you ever noticed that? Procrastination. I mean, it can happen on a daily basis. Sometimes you wait, you know, the night before you think, I'm going to get up and meditate tomorrow morning. It's good to do meditation in the morning. But then maybe you wake up late, or you're too tired, or you just start doing other things. And before you know it, the day goes by and you haven't really done any practice, any meditation. So it would be very sad if our life were to go by and we didn't get around to doing what is really valuable: spiritual practice, Dharma practice. So, yeah. So realizing that our time is limited can give us a strong push, a strong incentive to make sure we arrange our life, we arrange our schedule so that we do have time for study and learning and practice of Dharma. It doesn't mean you have to give up everything and be a full-time practitioner, and some people do that. But even just a little bit of practice every day, like Lama Yeshe used to say, even just 5 minutes of meditation is good. Better than nothing. And it might be that you start with 5 minutes and then you find it so helpful you want to do more. And then pretty soon you're doing more and more and more and more and getting more and more interested. So that might happen, that your interest will push you to spend more time. So could we go back to that slide? I had one more thing to talk about on there. So after meditating on those 3 points, then the ideal conclusion to come to is I must practice Dharma, meaning, you know, like I really see the value. Dharma, the word Dharma simply means spiritual practice. So seeing the value of Dharma, spiritual practice, and making a determination to do it, even just a little bit. So we'll do a meditation on these after lunch. Now is time to end for this morning session, and probably ready to have a break and have some food. So before we finish, let's take a few moments to mentally dedicate the positive energy we've created so far in this day, spending this time together with a positive motivation, an altruistic motivation. So we've definitely created some good energy, what we call merit in Buddhism. And the best thing to do with our merit, this positive energy, is to share it with others. So just mentally remember the motivation you had at the beginning, wishing to help others as much as you can. Bring that back into your mind. And then feel the wish that we could share this positive energy with other people, other beings, with all living beings, if you're comfortable with that. Wishing that it will bring them peace and happiness, freedom from suffering, freedom from the causes of suffering, which are ignorance, afflictive emotions like anger, jealousy, attachment, and so on. So may all living beings become free of those so that they can actualize their potential for liberation, peace, and ultimately enlightenment. Okay, thank you. So we start again, I think at 1:30, is that right?